Stay focused, don't listen to nobody. What's on your mind, just do it. Cause what's destined for you, you gonna get it.
Nice, I have another direction here. This time I have top 10 corrupt police officers caught and got jail for life.
Officers carry out their duties with honor and integrity. A few have abused their power, betrayed the public trust, and committed heinous crimes. From brutal murders to organized crime, these 10 officers crossed the line and faced the consequences of their actions. Join us as we explore their stories, the evidence against them, and the sentences they received for their crimes. Number 1. Wayne Jenkins. Wayne Jenkins was a former police officer and gun trace task force leader in Baltimore, Maryland. The Gun Trace Task Force was a specialized unit of the Baltimore Police Department that was responsible for investigating violent crimes and illegal firearms trafficking. Jenkins had served as a police officer for over a decade before his career ended when he was implicated in a wide-ranging corruption scandal. The investigation into Jenkins and the Gun Trace Task Force began in 2015 when the FBI received a tip that unit members were committing robberies while on duty. The FBI launched an investigation and discovered that Jenkins and his team indulged in various illegal activities, including extortion, theft, drug dealing, and planting evidence.
This is literally the same as a gang, bro. What? Extortion, drug dealing,
Theft, drug dealing, and planting evidence.
planting evidence, bro. This is literally a gang. On the police force, like what?
Jenkins was the task force leader and used his position to orchestrate many of the illegal activities. He and his team routinely robbed drug dealers and others they believed had cash and drugs. They would steal money and drugs and then sell them on the street for profit.
He's literally selling like a cop that goes take out like drug dealers, then they steal their money and drugs. Like what?
They also planted evidence
And the other guys don't say nothing because they're a part of it.
on suspects to bolster their cases and obtain convictions. Jenkins and his team were eventually caught when they robbed a man who was an FBI informant. It led to a lengthy investigation that revealed the full extent of their criminal activities. In 2017, Jenkins and 6 other officers were indicted on federal racketeering charges. The case against Jenkins and the Gun Trace Task Force was one of the most extensive corruption investigations in the history of Baltimore Police Department. The investigation exposed significant flaws within the department's internal accountability systems, including
One is one thing, but like 7 police, bro.
a lack of oversight and a culture of impunity. In 2018, Jenkins pleaded guilty to several charges, including racketeering, robbery, and filing false reports. He was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Jenkins' sentencing was a significant moment in the investigation, as he was considered the ringleader of the criminal enterprise. Jenkins' sentence reminded other police officers and public officials that law enforcement would not tolerate corruption in law enforcement. It was also a reminder
How the FBI give him like 25 only.
that the actions of a few bad actors could profoundly impact the community's trust in the police. Overall, Wayne Jenkins' case is a cautionary tale of the importance of integrity in law enforcement and the devastating impact of corruption on public trust and safety. While the vast majority of police officers are honest and dedicated public servants, it's essential to hold those who engage in corrupt activities accountable for their actions. The case against Jenkins and the Gun Trace Task Force underscores the importance of robust oversight and accountability mechanisms to prevent corruption and ensure that police officers uphold their duty to serve and protect their communities. Number 2, Michael Dotro. Michael Dotro was a police officer in the town.
Planting drugs. Planting drugs and their tanks on the innocent people. That's fucked up.
Officers uphold their duty to serve and protect their communities. Number 2, Michael Dotro. Michael Dotro was a police officer in the township of Edison, New Jersey, who committed multiple crimes, including arson, conspiracy to commit official misconduct, and stalking. In 2013, Dotro set fire to the home of a superior officer with whom he had a disagreement with. The officer's family, including 2 children, were inside the home at the time, but fortunately, no one was injured. Dotro also attempted to burn down the home of another police officer he perceived as a rival. In addition to arson, Dotro was charged with conspiracy to commit official misconduct for using police resources to access information about individuals in...
When you're a cop and you don't like cops, like what? Burning their houses, that's with their families, bro, what?
Involved in a lawsuit against him. Dotro's legal troubles continued when he stalked his former girlfriend and made false police reports about her. He used his position as a police officer to harass and intimidate her, and even installed a tracking device on her car. He was charged with stalking, falsifying a police report, and computer theft. In 2017, Dotro pleaded guilty to 1 count of conspiracy to commit official misconduct and 1 count of arson. In exchange for his plea, prosecutors dropped the remaining charges against him. He was sentenced to 20 years in prison and is not eligible for parole until he serves at least 17 years. The case of Michael Dotro is a stark reminder of the importance of upholding the law, even for those in positions of authority. Dotro's actions were a blatant abuse of his power as a police officer and endangered the lives of innocent people. It's crucial for law enforcement agencies to thoroughly vet and monitor their officers to prevent such abuses from ever occurring. Furthermore, the case highlights the need for accountability and consequences for those who engage in criminal behavior, especially when it involves stalking and harassment. It's essential to support the resources of victims of these crimes.
But burning, like, he had like personal problems with his superior, trying to burn their house and his family, like what? That's too much.
And uphold perpetrators accountable for their actions. Number 3, Daniel Holtzclaw. Daniel Holtzclaw was a former Oklahoma City police officer convicted of sexually assaulting multiple women on duty. Holtzclaw committed the crimes between December 2013 and June 2014.
Yeah, so many women on documentaries saying they got raped by cops.
Well, Holtzclaw patrolled a low-income neighborhood. Holtzclaw targeted vulnerable women, including those with outstanding warrants or who had criminal histories, believing they would be less likely to report the assaults. He used his position of authority to coerce these women into sexual acts, threatening them with arrest if they did not comply. Holtzclaw's crimes were first brought to light when a woman reported that he had sexually assaulted her during a traffic stop. It led to an investigation which uncovered a pattern of abuse that spanned several months. In total, 13 women came forward with allegations against Holtzclaw. The women described similar experiences with Holtzclaw using his power to intimidate and manipulate them. He would often perform searches or pat-downs that escalated into sexual assaults. He also made suggestive comments and demanded sexual favors in exchange for leniency. During his trial, Holtzclaw maintained his innocence, claiming that the women had fabricated the allegations as part of a conspiracy against him. However, the jury found him guilty on 18 counts, and the judge sentenced Holtzclaw to 263 years in prison.
200?
Holtzclaw's
Bro,
crimes
what? It's like 3 lives in prison, like, bro, he's going to rot in prison.
Devastated his victims, who were already struggling with poverty, addiction, or mental health issues. They were left traumatized and ashamed, with few resources for support or justice. The case of Daniel Holtzclaw represents a disturbing example of the power dynamics and systemic issues that contribute to police brutality and sexual violence. The case also highlights the complex intersection of race, class, and gender in cases of sexual assault. Holtzclaw's victims were predominantly women of color, many struggling with poverty, addiction, or mental illness. These factors made them vulnerable to abuse and less likely to receive support or justice. The fact that Holtzclaw specifically targeted these women underscores the need for a broader conversation about how systemic inequality perpetuates cycles of violence. Furthermore, the trial and conviction of Holtzclaw raised ethical questions about the role of law enforcement in society. As public servants, citizens entrust police officers with protecting and serving their communities. When they abuse that power, they harm individuals and erode the public's trust in law enforcement. Number 4, Zachary Wester. Zachary Wester was a former sheriff's deputy in Jackson County, Florida, who was accused of planting drugs on motorists during traffic stops and arresting them on false charges. The investigation into Wester's conduct began in 2018 when a prosecutor in Jackson County noticed irregularities in the case that Wester was bringing to court. The prosecutor contacted the FDLE, which investigated Wester's conduct. The investigation uncovered a pattern of misconduct and abuse of power that had been ongoing for several years, ultimately leading to his arrest and conviction on numerous charges. According to the FDLE investigation, Wester routinely conducted illegal searches of vehicles during traffic stops and planted drugs or other contraband on motorists. He would then arrest the motorists on false charges.
Hey, copies, trying to fuck all the people he stopped on traffic, putting drugs, like what?
And submit false reports to cover up his actions. In some cases, Wester also stole money from the motorists he arrested. The investigation uncovered numerous instances of Wester's misconduct, including at least 12 cases where he wrongly arrested motorists on drug charges. In one case, Wester was caught on his body camera planting a bag of illegal substances in a woman's car. In another case, he arrested a man on drug charges after finding a syringe in the man's truck, even though the syringe was later found to contain no drugs. In August of 2019, Wester was fired from his position as a deputy sheriff. In July 2020, he was arrested and charged with numerous crimes, including racketeering, official misconduct, fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, and drug possession. The court was also charging him with perjury for lying under oath about his conduct during a 2018 custody hearing. In May 2021, Wester was found guilty of 19 of the 67 charges against him, including racketeering, official misconduct,
67 charges, bro.
Fabricating evidence, false imprisonment, and drug possession. In July 2021, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison for his crimes, and the judge ordered him to pay restitution to his victims. Number 5, Dennis Perkins.
Years, bro. That's so
Dennis Perkins was a former police officer in Louisiana convicted of sexual crimes against children. The abuse came to light in 2017 when a victim disclosed it to a school counselor, who then reported it to law enforcement. Perkins was arrested in August 2017 and charged with 60 counts of child sexual abuse. At trial, the victims testified about the abuse they suffered at the hands of Perkins. The prosecution also presented evidence, such as text messages and photographs, that supported the victims' accounts. In his defense, Perkins claimed that the allegations were part of a conspiracy against him, and that the victims had been coached to lie. However, the judge sentenced him to 100 years in prison without the possibility of parole. Perkins' case drew national attention due to his background as a police officer. Perkins had worked for several law enforcement agencies, including the Livingston Parish Sheriff's Office, the Baton Rouge Police Department, and the Louisiana Attorney General's Office. His conviction raised questions about how he can continue working in law enforcement despite misconduct allegations. Following Perkins' conviction, his wife, Cynthia Perkins, who was also arrested and charged with obstruction of justice. She was accused of bribing one of the victims to recant their testimony and attempt to intimidate this witness.
Even though a woman, like what?